1,400 hours, as most people in here would say. Thank you for all attending. Because we have some voting members that are doing this remotely under the law, we have to have roll call on all votes. But I am going to go down now, and we will do the roll call of everybody present and those on the WebEx also, if they can identify themselves. So please, I'll start now going down the list. John Swenson.
Here.
Okay. James Stewart.
Here, sir.
Jeff Caters. Here. Brad Wise.
Here.
Josh Antoine.
Here.
Patrick Antonin.
I'm here.
Thank you. Lenny Austin.
Here.
Julie Brasted.
Here.
Julie, I know we talked a little earlier. Could you identify the address where you're attending this meeting from, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. 15203 Radisson Road, Ham Lake, Minnesota.
Thank you, Commissioner. Sherry Bukala.
Here.
Tony Cavane. Dan Deno.
Mr. Chair, he called to say he was not going to be able to make it due to a last minute.
Okay, thank you. Steve Feldman.
Here, Mr. Chair.
Chelsea Howell.
Here.
Brad Johnson.
Present.
Okay. Amada Marquez Simila. James Mork.
Here.
Robert Nelson.
Here.
Dave Oswald.
Here.
Okay. Captain Andy Youngquist for Chief Peterson. Brian Padani.
Here.
Tim Sanders.
Mr. Chair, he will be running late, but he is on his way.
Thank you. Scott Schulte.
Here.
Todd Schweiger. Brian Weirkey.
Here.
Brian West.
Here.
And Charlie Thompson.
Here.
Okay, all those on the WebEx, please identify yourselves for the record. Anybody else?
Bill Steiner with Coon Rapids PD.
Thank you.
Catherine Tim with the Anoka County Attorney's Office.
Thank you.
Corey Camp with Anoka County Finance.
Thank you.
Britta Maddox, Public Safety Data System.
Thank you.
Mayor Steve Feldman, City of St. Francis.
Thank you.
John Stanky, Coon Rapids Police.
Thank you.
Val Sprincenatic, Emergency Communications.
Thank you.
Barry Stoltzman, Emergency Management, Anoka County.
Thanks. Thank you. Anybody else?
Jason Nyhart, PSDS.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's everybody, and we have a couple of guests here, looks like.
Mr. Chair, actually, I'll introduce them.
Okay, absolutely. Whoever wants to, please do.
Yeah, our working group that's related to our civil disturbance that we talked about last time, and we'll get it as an agenda item. Two guests with Mark Ray, who's with Public Works for the City of Crystal. They're Stephanie Revering, who's Chief of Crystal, the immediate past president.
Okay, welcome both of you. Been a while since we said Chief Reverend here.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Eric Padden, Chief, bumped in late. Eric Padden, Chief from Plymouth.
Thank you. Welcome. Well, welcome everybody. This is the January meeting of the annual meeting of the Anoka County Joint Law Enforcement Council. Appreciate everyone attending. We'll go on to item number. Did I miss anybody in terms of roll call? Oh, sorry.
All Lensmer.
Thank you. Anybody else that I missed? Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm trying to speak up so that people on the WebEx can pick it up because I've got the only one, two. I don't think there's any other mics, are there? Okay, just the two. All right. So we'll please do our best to kind of speak up so people on the WebEx can hear it. Thank you. Let's go to item number 2, which is the approval of minutes. Attachment A in your materials. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Okay, any? Seeing no additions or corrections, modifications, I as chair will declare the minutes stand as typed. So we'll go on to item number 3, This is our annual meeting. We have to have an election of the executive committee. The executive committee consists of the chair of this body, John Swenson, James Stewart, Jeff Caters, and Chief Wise has declined because he's retiring in June. So I've asked Brian Padani if he would be willing to serve the chief of Blaine on the executive committee, and Brian has graciously agreed. So at this time,
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of the slate of nominations, the executive committee.
is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Motion by Commissioner Schulte, Chair Stewart. Brad, did you second it?
Yeah.
Okay, second by Councilman Brad Johnson. All right.
IT asks us to speak up so that when you're on the outskirts, we've got 2 microphones. We really need the outskirts to speak up when they're talking.
That's why I'm trying to project. Here's an
Second.
Very good. Very good. That's what we like to see. Okay, any discussion? No discussion. So that would be a motion not only to nominate, but also to elect, right?
To elect and close nominations.
Okay, and I assume that's
Second.
second. Okay, very good. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, thank you. The executive committee has been reelected. What the executive committee does, just for the new members of this body, is occasionally, we have meetings quarterly, and occasionally something comes up that needs emergency assistance, that we have to make decisions right away, and we don't have time to call a full meeting. So what we generally do is I call the executive committee together. We make the decision, and then it's usually ratified at the next meeting. Just a point of information. Okay. Thank you. All right, let's move on. Also, our bylaws, item number 4, which is approval of committee members. You will see on attachment B are the committee members. Those are appointed by me and ratified by this body at the annual meeting. Each committee then elects its chair. So all we're doing today is I'm asking for a motion to approve appointment of these committee members as listed on attachment B. Can I have a motion to that effect?
St. Francis makes that motion.
Francis makes the motion. Second, and Mayor Buchla. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Committee members are re-elected. Let's move on to item which is number 5, which is a treasurer's report, which is your attachment C. Sheriff, you're a treasurer, but generally you defer to, or would you like to have it, or would you want to defer to Corey Camp?
Mr. Chair, I'll usually do the high-level flyover, and if we get into the weeds, I'll defer to Magic and Curtin with Lori.
Okay, go ahead, Sheriff.
As of December 31st, our 2021 actuals were at 2 million, oh boy, there goes the eyes, $518,719, which does match our total revenue that had been budgeted. Under our expenditures, total administrative support is $393,438 compared to our budgeted $439,500. Our total systems and maintenance support is at $1,041,179 compared to budgeted $1,138,600. And our total operations came in at $1,504,179 compared to budgeted $1,684,700. And while the original budget had been at about 165 plus a deficit, the magic of the team there, we're able to bring it in at 14,540 under budget, bringing our current estimated fund balance to $768,699.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. Any questions of the sheriff?
I defer to Corey for any further information, Mr. Chair.
Corey, do you have any additional information?
Just wanted to point out 2 things. Number 1, this is our estimated year-end 2021. It is not final yet. We're still processing bills from last year and well for the next few weeks. So in April, we will bring the final number, which will be there, but we don't expect it to change very much at all. But at the end of the day, you are coming in under budget about $180,000, which adds $14,540 to the fund balance, as the sheriff pointed out. So we're in a very good position as we move into 2022.
All right, thank you. Any questions of either Sheriff or Corey? Any member? At this time, since this is a financial matter, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the treasurer's report. And because we have members attending by WebEx, I have to do this by roll call. So first of all, I'd like to have a motion. Anyone feel inclined to make a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair, I'll move.
Okay, Chief Wise approves, makes the motion to approve the treasurer's report.
Second that.
Chief Swenson, second. Okay, any discussion? Hearing none. Unfortunately, under the law, I have to go down the row here, so I will take it down. John Swenson.
Yes.
James Stewart.
Aye.
Jeff Caters.
Aye.
Brad Wise. Josh Antoine.
Aye.
Patrick Antonin.
Yes.
Lenny Austin.
Aye.
Julie Brasted.
Aye.
Sherry Bukala.
Aye.
Steve Feldman.
Aye.
Chelsea Howell. Brad Johnson.
Aye.
James Moore.
Aye.
Robert Nelson.
Aye.
Dave Oswald.
Aye.
Captain Andy Youngquist.
Aye.
Ryan Padani.
Aye.
Jim Saunders is not joined, is that correct? Chief? Padani? Okay.
Correct. Still not.
Scott Schulte?
Aye.
Todd Schweiger? Ryan Werke?
Aye.
Ryan West?
Aye.
Charlie Thompson? Okay, motion passes. Move then to item number 6, which is the preliminary consideration of the 2023 budget. New members and our guests, what we do is we usually vote on our budget in July, but as we are concerned obviously about city councils and setting their budgets, et cetera, we prefer to at least begin to give you a heads up as to what we are proposing for the 2023 budget. So at this time, there's going to be no vote on it, but it's just an information item. And we'll have Finance Director Corey Camp. If you would, Corey, please address the body.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. JLEC members, good afternoon. So what we're looking at here in attachment D is, again, this is a preliminary. Our goal is to set the revenues or dues that each jurisdiction pays at a virtual overall 0% change. Obviously, this doesn't naturally reflect due to the formula. That will adjust the individual dues slightly. It looks like the law enforcement would drop slightly by about 2% on our estimate. Emergency communications and fire would increase slightly by 1.41% for emergency communications and fire by 0.55%. If you recall last year, emergency communications reduced by 1.59%, where law went up by 1.59%. Some of this has to do with, as we adjust the budget, certain items are law only or fire only, and other items are spread among all 3 categories based on the super formula. So as we look at our overall budget, that our expenditures, we are expecting a 2% decline in our administration support costs. We are building in some increase overall in some of the line items, but with the drop off of the Weinman contract, that contract has come to an end. We expect to see about a 2% decline in the administrative support need. As we look at the overall system maintenance and support, based on what we know today, and again, some of these are being vetted right now, so we don't necessarily have final numbers in from some of the vendors in case there's a change that might occur that we're unaware of. We do expect about a 2.91% overall increase in our support needs. And so you'll see that about a 3% for the Central Square contract. LOGIS support is about 3%. And some of these may change as we're finding sometimes software contracts are going up more than people had thought. There's been as everyone knows, inflation has been a major factor in our world today. And so if there's something we missed, we'll be bringing that back in April, and we'll bring a much more robust packet back in April. But we're expecting we can hold the overall operational budget to a 1.4% increase overall. And then we are anticipating using about 122,000 in reserves to offset and keep us at a 0% increase in the overall revenue. So with that, are there any questions that anybody has?
Any questions of Corey Camp by members of the body? Any observations? As you can see, we're trying to draw down our reserve a little bit to offset some of the annual dues. We want to get our reserves down to about 20%. Is that correct, Corey?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, and I think we're at what level are we at now?
We're a little over 50% right now.
Okay. Okay. This is for information only, again, just to help in planning for any city budgets coming up. Thank you. Thanks, Corey. Let's move on to item number 7, which are committee reports. The first one is the Governance Committee, Chief Wise, Public Safety Data System. If you would, sir.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple things. First, I want to talk about that reserve fund at least a little bit. Is that at our last meeting, we talked about the planning and preparing for a civil disturbance and identified that fund as being and we'll get back to it later when we make the formal presentation. But I just want to be mindful that there's that dollar amount that's there. It's obligated in a couple of different ways. The $768,000 that you mentioned is obligated for the 2022 budget. It's obligated for the 2023 budget, as you just heard. Then we will have a 20% fund balance, which we will maintain, which leaves, as we stand today, about roughly $200,000 in that reserve fund that's unobligated. So we'll circle back to that number. Civil disturbance. With that, then the governance committee did meet. The one thing that I will mention that's especially relevant for this group is that right now one of the projects we're working on is I guess what we're calling an access agreement, J-like, and as you know, there are other complementary systems for PSDS, central communications, and central communications for the purpose of maintenance needs some sort of access. Is that we want to have an agreement in place between them. So the governance committee will be hashing that out. So with that, I think I pass it on.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Then we'll go to item 7B, which is the manager's report. George, attachment E in your handouts.
Attachment E is a PSDS update as of January 19, 2022. I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but just a couple of things that have come up since then. We discovered our USDD, US digital servers. They do the automatic dispatching for our fire. Across the county, those servers have to be shipped off to the vendor to have updates applied to them. We're just starting that process. We discovered that yesterday, and we're just starting the process. I'm working with Kevin Allen, the Anoka IT rep. They started out taking it out of the server today, so that's going to be an expense. It was unplanned. It's all we have to do is pay for the shipment of the servers to and from the vendor. So that's a new one that just came up, and then we had that one server. If you look on page 2, I think it is under load just. We had one server that was non-compliant with the state. They've been gracious enough to give us some leeway on getting that server updated. That was updated this morning, and so we're now 100% compliant with the state of Minnesota. Other than that, that's the update.
Thank you, George. Any questions of George Jensen on attachment E? Yep. Hearing none. Thank you. Let's move to 7C, which is a contract. George, if you can explain this one a little bit.
So back to attachment E, the last page on there has, page 8 has some of the remaining elements of our implementation project. Our implementation project is started in 2013. It's still going on. These are the items that need to be accomplished by Central Square in order to complete that project. And you see that first line, it has the word SIM in it, Common Identity Management. So basically, it's a user's ability to use the same credentials to get in any part of the Central Square system. Central Square has deemed that, although it is part of our RMS or our the FBR, commonly referred to as FBR within the county, part of that project. It is not part of the CAD project. I tried to work through that with them in several different ways. They will not give. We did agree to become what they call an early adopter to this program. It's not something that is implemented across the board anywhere. Actually, nobody's got it in. Talked with Val at the Emergency Communication Center. We're interested in pursuing this as an early adopter. And then because we are an early adopter, we do get 50% off the total cost of the quote. So the quote is $37,245 with a discount of $18,622.50. Our cost is $18,622.50. That is over my limit of spending without going to the committee, so I have to present to the board.
That's great. So the body, George, has a limit of $15,000. Anything over that has to come before this body for approval. So you're recommending to this body, George, that we purchase this SIM?
I think this is what we've always wanted. It's part of what we always wanted, for whatever reason, Federal Squares and County is part of the original.
Okay, recommendation at this time. I guess I'd entertain a motion to purchase.
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Commissioner Schulte,
Second.
second by Sheriff Stewart. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, it's financial, and I gotta go through the roll call again.
One clarification.
Yes.
This money will come out of the 2021 budget, but our estimates sort of include this dollar that was included as part of our outstanding costs in 2020.
That is set forth in attachment F, correct, George? Anybody has any questions? All right. I got to do the roll call for the motion. John Swenson.
Aye.
James Stewart.
Aye.
Jeff Caters.
Aye.
Brad Wise.
Aye.
Josh Onflon.
Aye.
Pat Antonin.
Aye.
Lenny Austin.
Aye.
Julie Brastad.
Aye.
Sherry Bukla.
Aye.
Steve Feldman.
Aye.
Chelsea Howell. Brad Johnson.
Aye.
James Moore. Robert Nelson.
Aye.
Okay. I will go back and Mayor Amata Marquez Simila, you're now online?
Yep,
Good, thank you. We'll count
Thank
you.
you.
I don't know if, did you hear the discussion, Mayor, about,
I did. Yep, I've been here for, I don't know, about 7 minutes, so
okay, thank you. And what is your vote then on the motion?
I vote aye.
Thank you. Robert Nelson,
Aye.
Dave Oswald,
Aye.
Andy Youngquist, Ryan Padani.
Aye.
Is Mayor Sanders on yet? Nope. Okay, Scott Schulte.
Aye.
Todd Schweiger. Brian Werke.
Aye.
Ryan West. Councilman West. Okay. And we'll move on to Charlie Thompson. All right, thank you. Motion does pass then. Go ahead. Let's go to item number D, which is the Data Standards Committee. Chief Caters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Data Standards Committee met on January 11th. We had 3 items on the agenda and the summary of each of those items. The first was to adopt a standard that all law enforcement users have a department-issued email address. We run into some security concerns with CJIS or Criminal Justice Information Systems if they have a Gmail address, a Yahoo address, what have you. So it's important that we have the standard that all have a department-issued email address from the agency that they represent. Number 2 was we talked about those persons who they identify with a different gender than they may have been born with, and how that affects the law enforcement data systems. And the recommendation of the group was to create an alias file or another file associated with the master name if the gender is different or preferred to be different. And we identified a business need for that because crimes committed as one gender and also potentially committed as another gender. So there was a business need for that. we identified that as the best way to do that. So it was attached to the master name in our systems. The third item was a discussion around requests that we received for dispatch supervisors to access law enforcement data. They currently do not. That item was tabled, and I want to talk with the CLEOs of each agency who input that data, whether they would like them to have access to that data. It can be very beneficial out on the street. I think the group's recommendation was that it be allowed. And we gave some examples of how the expectation from the officers on the street is that dispatch should have this information as they're on a call for service. So that item had been tabled for till the next committee meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Any questions of Chief Caters on that? Or further communications from you on that, Chief? Thank you. Let's move to item 7E, which is the Emergency Communications Committee. Sheriff Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Emergency Communications Committee met on December 14th. We had a variety of discussions. One of the key elements was personnel. At that time, they were in, CC was in double digits in vacancies, but they've been working very aggressively to fill those positions, and they've had some good luck. We all know that the training for those positions can take a while, so we appreciate everybody's patience during that time. And if you have any needs or issues related to those things, certainly let Val and her team know, but they're doing a great job in trying to close those gaps. We also just had some operational discussions. One of those areas was specific to the BCA encryption recommendation for the radios, knowing that there's a large financial cost to that. Some police departments are not online, and it's a significant impact to the fire departments. At this point, we're waiting to receive further direction from ECN and will not be proceeding with that encryption. And then we had a discussion on, as we're all very familiar with, recruitment and retention challenges and some of the things that might be out there as their priority calls continue to increase. We know we're seeing increases in carjackings and robberies and mental health challenges. And so the recruitment and retention, as with all of us, has never been more important and never been challenging. There's also going to be a legislative move. The dispatch retirement fund is currently in the general para fund, and they're going to be creating legislative drafts for bills to move them into the correctional para fund. So that's more of an FYI as they work on that. And we rounded out with discussion on, I think everyone ought to be aware, but just in case, the county's moving forward with the new PSAP facility. And so there was some further discussion on that, what the plans look like, and a thank you to the Anoka County Commissioners for making that investment. We know that the PSAP doesn't just serve the dispatchers, but obviously on a very large scale serves all Anoka County public safety, and so we're greatly appreciative of that. And lastly, just on behalf of the committee, it's been a lot of challenging times that they've been going through down there, so we'd just like to thank the PSAP team for all of their ongoing great work and the way that they support Anoka County public safety. And I don't know if, I don't think, Val, do we have anybody else? I guess that's the next category. Is yep. I'll wrap it up on behalf of the committee, so thank you.
Any questions, Sheriff Stewart? It's for our new members. PSAP means Public Safety Answering Point, which is essentially your communication center. All right, thank you. And that segues into F, the Emergency Communications Department. Val?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things. We got our final call counts from 2020 to 2021. We took approximately 20,000 more calls in 21 than we did in 20. As the sheriff said, a lot of them have been higher priority calls and a lot of mental health calls. So our dispatchers continue to deal with those, and we have put a lot of effort into dealing with our dispatchers, their own mental health, and making sure that, you know, they're able to come to work every day and function and do their job. And then Corey DeMuth, our radio shop manager, has been working a lot with all the departments to update their fire pagers and make sure. We've been having some issues, but we're working to resolve those and hopefully get those all put behind us so they work as designed shortly. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Any questions for Val? Seeing none. All right. Let's move item to item number G. Item G is at our last meeting, we had some discussions about civil unrest and how to protect government buildings. And we asked for a subcommittee, an ad hoc committee. to discuss that. And Chief Wise graciously volunteered to be the chair of that. And he does have a report, I understand, today, and he has brought along some guests from Hennepin County. Chief Wise, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, our ad hoc committee was about basically emergency preparedness for civil disturbance. Specifically, we're talking about fencing needs, rehashing the need. In the course of our meetings, we did a fair amount of discussion about how to make a presentation to this group about what we're going to do. Meanwhile, we knew or had learned that kind of law enforcement agencies were already running down that trail. And accordingly, when we connected with Hennepin County, it made sense to try to understand what they're doing and see if maybe we should team up as opposed to us doing something in there. So Lenny Austin did some of the groundwork action, and then Mark Ray is represented here to my immediate right. He's Public Works Director for the City of Bristol. Then as I introduced Chief Patton and Chief Revering were part of the steering committee, I would say, then regarding what their preparedness was. And I know they, Mr. Ray prepared a presentation, and that those materials are coming. He would just go through it and show you what kind of.
Thanks, Chief. Can we pull these up on the screen or not? Will that help you, Mr. Ray?
Yeah, I'm flagging up right now. So.
Okay, however you want to do it. Well, that'll help people on the WebEx and others. Go ahead,
Well,
Mr. Ray.
Thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate the invite today. My goal is to go through this presentation fairly quickly to really allow time for discussion. I think that's where a lot of the good information sharing has. So a couple quick things right out of the gate. You're going to hear a couple different terms. The working group is just the people from all the agencies that come together. This absolutely started in Hennepin County, but it has quickly grown beyond the county. We have Ramsey, Dakota, Washington County, and then myself and Chief Patton are going to Harbor and Scott County next week. So we're really trying to engage kind of that metro area because as we'll talk about, anti-scale fencing is very expensive. So the more we can spread that cost around, the better for everybody. The Fence Consortium is the legal group that will be established by the Joint Powers Agreement. It does not exist. That's kind of what we're building towards. The Joint Powers Agreement is the legal document that will be establishing the consortium. Each city will need to approve that JP to then join the consortium. So if Anoka County were considered, each city within Anoka County would have that choice up to them if they wanted to join or not. That is the point of no return, which sounds way scarier than it really is, but that's when you're officially in. Everything right now, this working group is very informal. We're trying to just learn and share information and get on the same page. So with that, next slide. Back in the spring of 2021, Hennepin Chiefs, Chief Revering was the president of that, identified the need for really fencing after the unfortunate experience in Brooklyn Center. I had the true honor and privilege of working with Chief Revering, so she immediately roped me into it. So the goal really is as quickly as possible. We're talking hours, not days. Get anti-scale fencing up around a police department after a critical incident. I do want to point out right now, we are only focusing on police departments. However, we are very much keeping in mind this might expand to other government facilities long term, but we want to start small, get it right, and then expand. We understand the current constraining factors are really product availability. The nearest anti-scale fencing is in Chicago, so at best you're about 6 hours away. Transportation of the fencing to and from the site, staffing for equipment for setup. If you hire a contractor and provide labor, they literally just hire local labor to deploy the fence. So it's not like they bring in a whole team of people necessarily, it's local labor. Then obviously just the response capability, because we understand this job can go south very quickly. And so needing that 365 response capability is very important. Next slide. Providing overall timeline. So we kind of started setting the deck in April, May. June and July, the group came together. We met with the Air Force Commission. They're in the fencing business. They have fencing around all of their facilities that meet FAA requirements, plus a ton of other varieties of fencing. We're also engaged with the U.S. Secret Service, both their local officer in charge as well as their fencing expert in D.C. They've been actively engaged throughout this whole effort. August, September, we met with the 4 vendors. These 4 vendors are who the Secret Service generally works with or affiliated with to provide that anti-scale fencing. In October, we made the decision on which vendors we want to proceed with. Then started preparing cost information, started talking logistics for this. As you see, we started the legal framework in November, December. and continue talking about kind of logistics side. Right now, as of actually yesterday, the JPA went out to that legal working group for kind of review and comment before being spread out to the larger interested parties for kind of a one look over before we say, okay, let's launch this thing. Then we're continuing the logistics and map development. Next slide. Quick anti-scale fencing basic. The big thing here is, I'm not going to read this whole slide, but if you want to learn about anti-scale fencing, there it is. Look at the slide, it points it out. Next slide. Here are just the early working members. Again, I want to stress this. This is not just a Hennepin County thing. This is really, we've really built a strong coalition here. We've engaged the Secret Service, Homeland Security, and a wide variety of people to really try to make the right decision for all of us. Right now, I believe there's over 60 different agencies on our email distribution list. So it's very grown, and that's excellent to see. Next slide. We also did procure, as you can see, a variety of different demo fencing panels. I do still have 3 of them at my public works facility if you want to come see, touch, and try to tip them over. But again, this was just give a hands-on experience, not only just with what the fence is like, but experience and practically how does it put together. For example, that concrete one, it looks great, but that would be very hard from a deployment scenario because those metal posts are literally bolted into the concrete. So just learned a lot of different things about the nuances of fencing. So that was a really good experience and very much helped drive some of the decision making our group did. Next slide. So where we ended up, we were only looking at ARX, which is the product around Brooklyn Center PD, and PGP, who does a lot of work with the Secret Service. Every other vendor we talked to, they just want to sell us fence. If we don't want to own fence for a variety of reasons, I'm more than happy to talk about that at a later time if you'd like. As Chief Wise said, you have about $200,000 essentially for this fence project. To give you an idea, that will buy you a whopping 650 feet of anti-scale fence. Just to provide that perspective there. Right now, the consortium is only looking at doing the outer layer of fencing, or basically 1 layer of fencing for a PD. We looked at originally doing 2, but we realized every PD is different, and some might not fit 2 layers in there. So that's where we just kind of ended up with 1. Fences, they're 4-foot wide panels, 8 feet tall. Also, there's 16-foot vehicle gates, which just have doors, and then there's 4-foot pedestrian doors that are built into the fence. So the standard package is kind of what you see here, which is basically an 8-foot fence with some vehicle gates. Each PD would get 4 vehicle gates for deployment and 5 of the pedestrian doors, and that's just kind of built into the standard package. Next slide. The logistics for this is the vendor will actually own and store enough fence somewhere in the 7 county metro area to cover the largest PD in the consortium plus a little bit. They'll be responsible for transporting the fence from that storage area to the PD where it needs to be deployed, and then obviously backing it. The consortium will use the statewide public works mutual aid agreement to provide public works staffing for unloading the fence at the PD and setting it up. Existing public police department mutual aid agreements or field force or whatever will be used for scene security. But one of the things in our procedures is we're very clear on that local chief is running the show from a security standpoint. We're just there to put up a fence. So we talk about operational decisions. I mean, we need to get the fence up, but scene security or whatever, you know, that's the local PD. So that we're not just showing up and saying, well, this is how we're going to do this. It's we're here to put up a fence. Can we just do that and get out of it? The fence deployment team will train 3 times a year. Really, that's to build muscle memory. We're trying to speed up how fast we can get this fence up. One semi will carry between 900 and 1,000 feet of fence. Our goal is to hopefully get that up within 2 hours, which is a little optimistic in terms of that assumes generally a straight line. But I think hopefully we can get there again. The goal is to be fast and handle it whenever the call comes. Next slide. From a staffing standpoint, again, each consortium member would have to provide some of their public works staff, defense deployment team. We're looking at a total team strength of 90 people. Where that math comes from is we really want to be able to get 30 people marshaled for response within 3 hours. So that's how we got to the 90. So depending on the size of the consortium, that would help dictate how many people an agency would offer up. Obviously, for smaller public works, one person's fine. The reason we want one is because our assumption is that local PD, the nearest public works shop that'll have a loader to unload the semi, will be their public works department. So that's kind of where the one minimum comes from. It's the guy running the loader to unload the semi. Again, for deployments, we have acknowledged the fact that we'll likely be up over time, so just as consortium members, be aware of that. And then PD and mutual aid or field force, that would all be under whatever existing mutual aid agreements are out there. There's no separate kind of labor part of this. Yeah, next slide. The way the cost splitting works, again, is every city and city consortium provides a map that says, here's where we want the footage, here's where the gates are, here's where the doors are. Again, you get 5 pedestrian gates, 4 vehicle gates, and that length of fence, that's what dictates your cost. So basically, we look at all of the fence from all the consortiums, and then you pay whatever your percentage is of that larger picture. So right now, we have 39 agencies that are part of it. The percentage is anywhere between, I think it's 1.5 and about 5% that any one agency is of the total picture. And again, the more we have, the further that cost is. Again, the total cost is determined by figuring out the largest PD and how much fencing we need to do that. And that cost is broken down. Next slide. The important thing we've really learned is these 4 things are really the big thing that drive the cost. Is how quick do you want the fence there? Where's the location? Do we need it in a certain area or a larger area? So that's why we opted for the 7-county metro area, is to try to, it's still close enough where you get there reasonably quick, but hopefully there can be cheaper locations. Who's doing the transportation of it? And then obviously how much of the fencing you need. So we worked through that. Right now, the way it's set is we want the fence to arrive at the staging area within 8 hours of the call. Basically, the reason for that is if you were much less, the vendor would have to provide full-time staff here in the metro, and there was a significant cost in that. So right now, the fence is right on it within 8 hours of the call. And we go from there. Well, we also talked about having enough fencing for the 2 largest PDs. Due to concerns about cost, we've now scaled that back to just the largest PD. That said, if the consortium grows, we can add footage, and then that cost would be split. So again, hopefully we can phase up to a higher level. Next slide. Here's an example of what the map looked like. Crystal PD, although it does not include the Chief New Palace. Our new police department is under construction currently. However, it does take account for it. But this is the standard map that every consortium would have. You can see the footage in there. You can see the gates. The idea is it becomes a rip and run kind of map. So if we're there at 3 in the morning, we can pull it up and we know where this fence needs to go. Next slide. As of a few days ago, 40 agencies have provided maps. You can see the numbers there, kind of where we're at for the split. Oh, there's the percentage. Nitpicky on there. I did run some quick numbers. Our average length is about 1,800 feet. That equates to about $7,000 a year is what the cost of that would be. But again, if all 11 agencies were to join, that's like a 25% increase in the number of members. So that percentage per agency would also go down. So I'm giving you like a $7,000 number for each 100 feet. Reality is, if everybody came in, that $7,000 actually. Next slide. So again, we have the fence working group. They're doing the mapping, talking about logistics and training. And we have the legal working group that's really working on the JPA structure and preparing to deal with some of the policy questions that we know are going to come in the contract. Next slide. The big thing I want to stress here is, we've been working on this coming up on a year now. We're doing constant moving forward. So as decisions are made, we don't go back and rehash things. Leasing is the route because storage and maintenance are not issues the consortium would have to deal with. And also Secret Service is actually getting out of the owning business for a lot of reasons. We're using existing structures as much as possible just again, we're moving forward. So with that, the next slide is my contact info. Photo on top is Brooklyn Center PD. Photo on the bottom is the PGP product up at Excel Energy Center. With that, Chair, I'm good. Chief Wise.
Mr. Chair, Mark, do you want to, when we talked about management, ongoing management, the group consortium, is that you want to explain what you set up?
So yeah, so the consortium will have a board of 7 people. The Minnesota State Chiefs of Police Association will be nominating 3 of those people. They do need to be consortium members. State Fire Chiefs will nominate 1, American Public Works Association 1, Minnesota Emergency Managers Association 1, and then the Association of City and County Administrators will have 1 nomination as well. So 7 total people, law enforcement has 3 of those, and then everybody else is split up among other associations. So again, it's really, we built this in the mind of this is a scalable thing, and hopefully this will grow to help spread that cost out, not just within Hennepin County, but within 7 county metro. And if it grows larger, so be it. One of the things we have anticipated is if it does grow larger, say Mankato or Duluth or whatever we're joining, that's fine, well, and good. But then we need to talk about different area commands as far as an operation. We're not sending somebody from Bristol up to Duluth to deploy a fence. So if Duluth were to jump aboard, they would need to have enough support in that area to provide that aspect. The reason we want it under 1 consortium is we're trying to reduce the amount of overhead. So that might mean if you're in Duluth, yep, it's still coming from our 7 county metro area, but you know your response time is going to be plus 2 hours per drive. Again, we're just trying to balance cost with a thing we hope we never need, but we're prepared to do.
Commissioner Schulte.
Mr. Chair, Mark, thank you for your presentation. Would this also include the sheriff's office? I mean, you keep referring to PDs.
Yes. So yeah, so correct. So the sheriff's main complex actually could, and so sheriff, that would be, you know, your call, and this is the building. So Washington County, for example, we have a map of their law enforcement center of where they go. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, Anoka County is the model, in my opinion, for consortium working together, collaboration, and I wonderfully appreciate what you're saying. My concerns are, as it broadens thinner and thinner and thinner, you're talking about 1 bulk for, I think it's 3,800 feet. The average, or the largest PD was 3,400. Anoka County's need was, I think, close to 3,500 at base level. And then knowing when we have, history is a good lesson for what the future might hold. If we have multiple sites that need it, I really fear that being spread across 7 counties and knowing 1 agency hypothetically on the end of our south border would probably be monopolizing a lot of the fencing. If anyone else needed it, what's the likelihood it's even going to be available? So I have some concerns with the larger scale consortium and being spread too thin.
So definitely 100% agree with those concerns. What we're really trying, the balance we're trying to strike is we're getting a lot of concerns with the cost.
Totally get it.
And then that's the likelihood. And so, quite frankly, with this approach, I would say this is where we're just trying to get the ball started, and then hopefully get enough people with the buy-in that we can increase the footage. As far as somebody monopolizing the footage, you only get an automatic plug-in for a critical incident, and that's one of the things the board's going to have to say. This is the box of where you get it. If there's any request outside that box, it would need board approval for deployments. The other important thing to note is even if the fence comes to you, there's still a charge. There's then a deployed charge. So this was kind of a check against somebody like, well, it's free. So yeah, just leave it here at 7 feet. You're going to be paying a fee on top of the availability charge if it's deployed at your PD. So there's some financial incentive to not hold it like that. As far as the multiple needs within, like if one city in Anoka had it and other ones around, that is a concern. And that is going to be a tough one to deal with until potentially more fencing is added. What I would say is that we'll at least have a structured arrangement with the vendor. So we'll be able to, there'll be a conduit for getting more fencing up because we'll have established a contractual relationship with them. But I mean, you called it spot on, the challenge of it's a lot of money for something I may never need, but if I need it, I'm going to need a lot. How do you balance those 2 things? And I would say that has literally been probably my sleepless nights is trying to find that balance.
And I appreciate everything you put into it. Thank you for coming today for the pitch. It really comes down to just throwing it on the table. If Minneapolis has the fencing tied up and Columbia Heights needs it.
But Minneapolis and Hennepin County are not part of the consortium, and it's something
I saw them on your list.
So they were part of the working group.
Okay.
So they had people involved with it, but they have not provided a map.
Okay, and that's what.
And I've got the.
I saw that name on the list, and that's what made.
Yeah, no, I actually debated putting it on there, but they did have people involved in exploring stuff, but they have literally flat out said we will not be part of this.
Here, I'll just add, we're working through this, as we don't have the plan really solidified and put in place. That has been our biggest challenge right now, and an issue to work through. And my question has been, how do we identify that tipping point where we add more membership with this consortium and add more fencing to that? And then our second piece is my big concern is we provide the commander for the Northwest Metro Broadcast. 5 officers from 5 neighboring agencies. They deal with high-risk violent offenders all the time. The likelihood of them being involved in a critical incident that creates controversy. Right? So what do we do when 5 different departments need this right away? So those are the issues that we're working through. I know that we're having those same concerns, and we really solution for that. And part of that is working through the vendor. Our experiences with Brooklyn Center, that we have all had officers at, their fencing's been up for over a year. So if we have this fencing up for a year, is there some sort of arrangement where the vendor can backfill that with that need? It's an issue, and if we're worried about it now, we all know that we have to plan for the worst we can't just talk about it.
One of the things we loosely talked about is, even in the bridge, is for whatever reason in Brooklyn Center, they only have the anti-scale in front of their 6-foot chain link on the rest. You could theoretically divide some of that fence up to split between multiple locations as a temporary.
Thank you.
Any other? Councilman Johnson.
Obviously, one of the benefits of this is the economies of scale, so that you can purchase a lot of it and you can keep the, per agency or per city contribution. What is the relationship between, if you're going to add more fence, say you want to double the fence because you've got more members that are there and you're trying to triage the risk versus the benefit stuff. You mentioned $7,000. If you double the fence, does that then mean that that's a double the $7,000, or is there a kind of a fixed amount that's just for the administration of some of this stuff? Can you give us?
We run that number right now.
Insight on that. And then the other, while you're looking that up, the other related question I have is, what have you learned from cities engaging in this from the elected official kind of point of view on what are the concerns that people are expressing to you? Because I think what I'm hearing from my city a little bit is similar to what the sheriff mentioned, which is if we need it and we're paying and we're contributing into it, who decides who gets what and when? And so what have you been hearing from the cities, and what's the kind of scheme for that?
So at this point, we've been really just among staff. You're actually the first elected officials to really hear about this like in a formal way.
You want me to keep the secret?
I think
yes.
So that's some of the things we flagged as challenges for the policy to work through is how do you handle that?
What does the MOU or the JPA look like?
Well, it'd be through the JPA, and then it'd be policies established by of what is a critical incident. To your first question, yes, it would basically double the price if you double the fence. And that is, the fence is, of all the costs, the linear fence is the biggest driver.
So let's say Anoka County and its departments and agencies come on board, that may drive a need for there being the potential for more fence in the kind of in storage. And that might mean that instead of $7,000, it's either staying the same or it's going up a little bit because we just, as a community, need more stuff.
So I guess the first part of that is the question would be, if there's an incident in Anoka County, where would the fence be going? Right now, the assumption is it would go to the precinct or wherever, or the PD of wherever the incident, not necessarily. So that's kind of phase one that drives it. if you were to, so when we look at the largest PD, that we would look at, although PD is okay, what's the largest there? That's slide. When you look at multiple PDs fencing, which is the original intent, that's where that number really jumps from what we need.
And then if we decide we want a different kind of perimeter fencing, like we want to have a double layer fence or a fence and razor wire or something like that, it just goes up.
Well, so if you want a second layer, that would be, you figure that out yourself.
Okay.
That would be on ours.
Gotcha.
Because it was one of the things we bumped into is, well, I want this, or I want this, or one of the chief whys that I talk about is some PDs are talking about building permanent fencing.
Yeah.
And this will supplement that. So maybe in the first, 2 years, they have, let's say, 3,000 feet, then they build some permanent fencing, and now they're down to 1,000 feet.
So that conceptually what you've designed is like, this is the rapid response kind of
Yes.
first.
Our goal was not repeating that first night at Brooklyn Center.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, because once this fence went up in Brooklyn Center, things changed rapidly for officers.
Chief Wise. Mr. Chair, I'll add, so what they're talking about isn't a perfect match with what we were talking about in our own community, because we were talking about subtly different things, like courthouse, which is sort of a different thing, because that maybe allows for pre-planning versus this emergency response. But also, it talks about, they're talking about having their public works staff are in alignment with this too, because they play a key role. And so that would require everybody to go to their public works directors and make sure that they're all on the same page. I will say, I do know that public works directors are talking to each other. You must have some sort of consortium.
I'm well connected. Yeah, so the Minnesota chapter of Public Works, American Public Works Association, Minnesota chapter, I'm well connected, but yes, I do also harass people.
And so I guess the bottom line, I think the opportunity was great for them to come and presentation this whole body, because I think they did a nice job of sort of laying out all the work that they've done. Frankly, I think our working group still is essential to get back to listening to this proposal, hashing it out with what we talked about as our needs, and then making a recommendation at the next meeting, this body for something, because it will require agreements in place. And I'll be interested to see what your agreement looks like. So I think it gave
A little bit. I think it's great that you already starting down the path, because nothing like trying to do it to figure it out ourselves. And thanks for coming. I think their program, it's still longer term in terms of availability and when you're gonna actually have our JPAs and such. So we still need a short-term interim. If this were to happen 60 days from now, we still don't have a plan. So I don't want to wait 2 years to get JPAs figured out, and in the meantime have a situation erupt. So we still have a short-term goal and a long-term vision as far as Anoka County that looks like. And I would stress Sheriff Stewart's comments that I've always envisioned kind of 2-3 sites deep, because even just in I think the last 6 months, we had 2 officer-involved shootings in side-by-side cities within, days if not shifts apart, where it was like, oh, what could that mean? Or because you have such a great mutual aid initiative, you can easily have multiple different.
Great comments, Mary. I guess the first thing, thank you for touching on the timeline. So as of yes, the joint powers agreement is out for review. Our goal is to get I would say, out to council, because we understand we're on borrowing. So get that rolling, and then simultaneously that going for approval or review, I am going to be getting an RFP with the 2 vendors to get the pricing. So once the review is done, hopefully we'll have the RFP done, consortiums get approved, and we can award the contract soon after and get moving on to summer. It's the timeline for there. I guess a quick touch on the courthouse stuff. We're actually intentionally not planning on doing courthouses, actually, the sheriff's point, we see courthouses being, first of all, planned and longer duration, which is really not what this is for. This was for that, we got a problem, we got to go now. So we want to keep the fencing available. So that's why I don't see it necessarily going out for something a little more structured.
I'm not concerned about courthouses. I'm talking.
I am. So, yeah.
I understand the concept of a planned event versus emergent. I'm talking, you have two PDs and the sheriff's office is also a responding agency. So the county is involved as a traditional third party. So that's 3 sites in itself. And sheriff's office is. I'm concerned about those folks.
That is a challenge, absolutely.
Chief Austin.
Mr. Chair, I think one thing to keep in mind with this work, whatever decision the JLEC decides as far as using the money, it was meant to supplement anything that any city is planning. So I think some of this might just tie into that. It might be a separate discussion that the individual cities may have to. So we were very interested in this, but we're also doing some solutions as well. Just simply because it's talking the same thing. We could have multiple events. St. Anthony is the largest footprint that you're basing that number on. You have an incident in St. Anthony or so we have to have some place to help with that as well. So I think we still need to move forward with some type of supplement, whatever these individual cities decides to do. But this is certainly something the cities that come with to chew on. It certainly give us a lot. So,
Chief Berkey.
And one of the biggest reasons why this came up so seriously is because what we in law enforcement were informed of in Brooklyn Center, and Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but if they didn't get that fencing up in a timely manner, they were going to lose that building without question, along with injuries and possibly lives to the protesters and the cops. There's no question about it. My department alone had 12 officers up there for 6 days. They were really the fence, and describe it to my elected officials that fencing up, that was the great de-escalator, especially that second layer. They originally had the concrete bollards with the chain link fencing on top, and it wasn't bolted, and they spent the next night or two basically in a struggle back and forth trying to hold that fence in place because the group just came up with the right out of the concrete bollard. So once that
I think that's a great thing too, regardless of what you all choose to do. We've put hours into looking at fencing stuff, and so we've learned a lot about even within J barriers with chain link. There are a lot of different ways you can do it, and it very much matters.
Councilman.
I would just encourage the other electeds who are here to really have a conversation with your city management, public works, and to get it on a workshop somewhere just to start the conversation, just to make other electeds aware of it. As Chief Wise gets the draft JPA and we get more, if we have a chance as a committee to talk about it some more and what recommendations might be, we can pass those along. But starting the conversation now is a lot easier to have with electeds who are wrapping their brains around this, rather than waiting until we need to sign a JPA or sign it. Sooner is better.
Mayor Feldman and then Mayor Buchla.
Mayor Feldman, thank you, Mr. Chair. The question I have is, I understand the leasing to the ownership aspect, but my question is whether it be 3,800 feet of fence or 7,000 feet of fence, is that designated only for our consortium, or are there other consortiums by this vendor that we may not be able to get the fencing when we need it because it's already been put out to some other consortium? So is it designated for us so that we have constant availability of the fence as we need it?
That is absolutely correct. So basically there would be whatever that footage is sitting in a warehouse in the 7-county metro area only for use by the consortium members. One of the challenges that the board's going to deal with too is, what if you have a city have an incident who's not part of the consortium and all of a sudden they want the fence? And so what mechanism are we going to have to be able to handle that type of situation?
Right, because the main part is, if we're going to go along with this, we have to make sure that constantly we have availability at all times when we need it.
And the biggest challenge there is if the fence goes out the door to somewhere else, what's in that reserve, what's left in there? One thing to note, at 3,800 feet, I think it's somewhere like at least half of the departments are under 2,000. So functionally, we can basically cover 2 of the smaller PDs simultaneously. And so again, that's part of the balancing risk and cost.
Right. My concern is for the members of the consortium, not the vendor making money off of something that we're leasing to benefit them, not us.
Thank you. Other questions? Mayor, did you have another?
I just wanted to offer up for any elected officials that are considering long-term protective measures that DHS Protective Services has a risk assessment professional available to cities. But I can tell you, if we all call at once, it's going to take a while to get it all done. But they will come out and do site assessments on your critical infrastructure for free and return a report back. So I don't want anybody to just walk out and say, oh, we can put a fence here and put a fence there. We do have services in the government hierarchy available to do those assessments for us, and then do your long-term planning and budgeting for permanent solutions that, you know, this would supplement too.
And I would say, so Mike Christensen is the local PSA, as well as Joe with Secret Service, and they've been involved in the whole thing. So if you call them up and say, I'm looking at doing this fence concern, they'll know what you're talking about. They've already done this at a number of other PDs throughout the metro. They're more than happy to do it. They kind of know the program we got going on.
Mr. Chair, Terry Stoltzman.
Terry.
Just to weigh in, good presentation, a lot of good information. I think it's a little bit different direction. I think the group members that are present in the room with you would have discussed a little bit about, you know, our public works versus others' participation. We had some really good work discussion and outputs. I would just weigh in at this time and say, I think you take this as informational, but I don't think this is the end of the discussion, my opinion. I think we should hear more about what our work group worked on.
Thanks, Terry. Other comments? Anyone want to weigh in? Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And like I said, our committee will meet again here in the future to talk about what kind of merge that with what we have been discussing, and then we'll hope to have a recommendation that makes sense for this whole body at our next meeting. That said, one of the things that I'll put forward right now is that one of the things that we would recommend to the JLEC is that, you know, like a civil disturbance or whatever committee might be a permanent committee or standing committee. I think this committee is dealing with this one. But I think we agreed that we would have to collaborate on something, and that's something that is going to exist.
Chief, do you anticipate meeting here sometime in the next few weeks?
Oh, yeah, for sure. We'll be meeting with that.
Is it a wish of this body that if you come to some sort of recommendations within those 2 weeks, do you wish to have a special meeting of this body, make some decisions as opposed to waiting till the end of April or May?
You think, Mr. Chair, can we wait until we have our next meeting?
Absolutely.
And then just ask for an emergency meeting?
I'm okay. I just wanted to throw the idea out there in case members of this body wanted to move quicker than
Well, you're
next
making a
meeting.
good point. We have trials going on right now that.
Well, who knows what's going to happen tonight with an officer involved shooting. So, as we all know, I mean, it could go a year, it could go an hour. And that's the problem we all face. So I guess, Chief, then what I would suggest as chair that if you feel based on, your committees or your subcommittees meeting, that you wish to have a meeting sooner, I certainly can call one. Otherwise, at this point, we will wait until our next meeting then. Fair enough to the body? Is that fair enough, Council? Okay. Chief Austin, you're okay with that? Okay. Well, very good. Well, thank you, Mr. Ray and the chiefs for coming in. We certainly appreciate the information. Obviously, this is not the end of the dialogue, but the beginning. So
as we come to learn, it's way harder than we thought, and there's a lot of nuances that I don't think we ever thought of walking into it. So
There's a lot of boxes to be checked.
That's it, me too.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. All right, with that, why don't we move on to item number 8, which is Fire Protection Council, Chief Thompson.
Mr. Chair, October 28th, we had a meeting of the Fire Protection Council. It was in Lionel Lake. Multitude of housekeeping items, but the biggest discussion was our training academy. We struggled to get instructors and a multitude of issues. So we put a working group together. They proposed several areas. Decided to, well, with an RFP, I think the RFP came back right. Yes, there were 3 responded. Century College, Fire Inc., and third vendor. That's my third. Thank you. The subcommittee that was looking at that didn't reach consensus on which vendor to go with, and so I believe the intent is fire protection. That was the biggest action item. Should come to the body. The other item on the agenda tomorrow is the proposed 2023 budget. Just the presentation, we do not adopt. Give the cities a little.
I want to make sure they can hear you on the WebEx.
Okay, so the budget will be presented. No action will be taken tomorrow. With that question.
Any questions for Chief Thompson? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Chief. Move on to item number 9, which is the Chief Law Enforcement. I believe Chief Padani.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the chiefs met last Wednesday. This year we're doing something a little different for our monthly meetings where we are having profiling work of each of our departments in the county here. We've always made an effort to bring in speakers and different programs from outside and from other areas, and we feel that a lot of our best work is being done right here in the county, and we can learn a lot from each other. So we started last week with Columbia Heights presenting on their DOJ grant for their embedded mental health professional. Again, this is a first in a series. Our next meeting is coming up Wednesday, February 16th, and the State Chiefs Association Executive Director Potts will be presenting an update for us at the state level, including some noteworthy legislative items that we'll be tracking. And also with our new positions, we do have Chief Mork is the new Vice President, and Commander Sheila Larson from the Sheriff's Office is the new Secretary Treasurer. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Chief. If I can, Chief Austin, maybe if you could touch a little bit on that DOJ program, because I thought it was interesting enough that you presented the CLEOs, but I think the rest of the officials in the room might want to hear about it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is something we were actually looking at and we're ready to present in our 2022 operating budget. At the same time, we were also applying for this DOJ grant. This is based on similar to some of the previous models that Hennepin County was working with the Minneapolis Police Department on. And we took some of that information. We also, when we started to really look at this, we also started to track not only the really easy things to track, like the number of medical transport holds that we were signing, but also any calls that we saw had either some type of mental illness, drug and or alcohol abuse as well, to determine what kind of, what work were we going to have for this person. And what we found was that probably approximately 30% of our calls have one of those 3 things involved. Also, our use of force statistics, roughly about the same. About 30% of our use of force incidents involve a person suffering from some degree of mental illness. So it certainly made a lot of sense for us to look at this model where this mental health professional would be working side by side with our officers and also actually working in the squads with them as well. So far, with the DOJ grant, we were fortunate. We were one of 34 departments in the United States to get one of those grants. And so far, just in the short few weeks that we've had this person on board, we've already seen some great outcomes. Specifically, with a couple of our incidents where we did have had a few people in crisis, clearly was going down the direction of medical transport of some kind and potentially a use of force incident. And by having that person with us on board, on scene, we were able to basically just take a big step back and allow that person to work with that individual and get them the services that they need. So far, so good. We are certainly going to be watching this closely because it's a 2-year grant, and if we really do look like this is something that we need to continue, it's obviously something we'll be looking at long term.
So this mental health professional is from a private medical agency, correct?
Yes, that is correct. It's actually, and that's the other nice thing. We've worked very closely with Canvas Health on this, and they basically helped us write the job description and also helped us with the interview and everything. And again, it's only the program is only good as the person that's in the program, and we were very fortunate that Canvas Health so far the person that they were able to find for us has been fantastic. She's got a significant background. She's got 12 years experience as a social worker, but 6 of those working in correctional institutions. And so she's really got a great background and really just fit well.
Thanks, Chief Austin. Mayor Marquez, similar, anything you want to add in, as it is in your city?
Just that we are just so thrilled to have our embedded social worker, and it's just very honoring to have that grant come in, and just the fact that, as Chief Austin said, that we've already benefited from having her join our department. And it's been great for the community to know that our police department was responding to, requests for social workers and having that ability to reach out to our community in a little bit different way. So I think it's been a great morale boost for our city as a whole. Thanks so much, Chief Austin.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's go on then a little further to 9B, criminal investigations. Sheriff or Commander?
Thank you, Chair. Paul Lensmeyer with the Sheriff's Office. I've got the next 2 sections.
Okay.
And it's called Criminal Investigations Division Update. We've got several personnel changes that are underway. We just hired a Jeremy Wittenberg from Brooklyn Center PD. He's started with us in December. So he's been working with our mentors in that capacity. We've got a second starting here on February 7th. Jesse Standel from Minneapolis PD, and if that last name sounds familiar, you guys were with his dad, Skip Standel, retired from prison. It's been really thousands. So we've got another background being completed on an additional candidate for a future vacancy that we anticipated at the end of February, and then we are planning for a new testing process for detective mid-February for anticipated additional vacancies. We just got word last week that Lieutenant Derek Schultz has been selected to attend the FBI National Academy, so he'll be attending. So we're excited for him to have that opportunity. Moving on to the next section for a training update. We've got a couple of trainings that we're hosting. The Sheriff's Office Street Crime Seminar, February 7th to 9th. Those are 2 full-day classes. We've got a basic FTO certification, February 7th through 11th. And then we have some makeup hours for the post-required autism and CIT training. So those officers that took those classes prior to the new post mandates that require additional hours, we are hosting 2 days, March 1st and March 2nd, to make up those additional 4 hours of coursework with autism
and CIT as required by the post.
Okay, thank you, Commander. Any questions of the Commander? Okay, hearing none. Move on then to Emergency Management. Terry Stoltzman, if you would, sir.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thanks. Sorry I'm not in person, but have to work remote at this time for a little bit. One big item at the beginning of the year, my counterpart to the Department of Public Safety, Homeland Security, Emergency Management, for the governor's office asked for an update from counties on community lifelines. And really what that means is we provide a report which includes health and medical, transportation, hazardous materials, communication, safety and security, and food, water, and sheltering. Green, yellow, red is kind of what they're looking for, and some comments in Anoka County when I put in a report based on what you see in hospitals and long-term care. That's basically a red. They have staffing crisis, which I'll talk about here in a minute. For the rest of us, communications, as we heard from Emergency Communications, Val Spencer-Natick, and from the sheriff, low staffing, the ability to fill shifts, and then COVID have been a problem, and just in general staffing for all public safety. Local jurisdictions have a surge of infection that affects law enforcement, fire, our dispatchers. So that's hard with the workforce. The biggest thing is what gaps do we have? And at the time, and still currently, we're working on those gaps, is testing, especially for those public safety personnel I just mentioned. Trying to get testing at a public facility is near impossible because you have to make an appointment when a deputy or a dispatcher or a police officer, firefighter has to go into work. A whole shift might be compromised. So Janelle Hubbard with Public Health has been working with them over the last couple of weeks trying to figure out some testing pathways for them, and still in process. The reason I bring this to your attention is I got a call yesterday from my counterpart at DPS Homeland Security. The governor's office saw those comments I had and asked about them. Reason it's important is someone's looking, they asked for the report, they're looking at those reports, so that's good to know, especially for all the electeds and chiefs in the room. But also why we're having problems. The basis for this testing is MDH is not releasing rapid tests and these PCR tests to our public health for this purpose, for public safety. They've addressed it for vulnerable adults, and that's a great and worthy cause, but we have a gap. So we listed that. So I just want to make sure everybody in the room had an awareness that we're currently working on the gap, and that's what was addressed to the DPS HSCM person who asked for the governor's staff. But we still have a gap, but we're trying to work through it. And if there's a better solution from a higher level, from the governor's office, if we could get rapid tests to our departments or other testing opportunities, that would be a great thing. But just know that I update this every couple of weeks. We only have those severe impact areas and moderate impact areas that I just described. The other one of note is long-term care facilities, and really it's our assisted livings, our group homes, our skilled nursing facilities, what we know as nursing homes. They are in huge staffing crisis, which just got amplified by the vaccine mandate at the federal level. Because a lot of them are required, especially the skilled nursing facilities, to follow federal rules because they get federal funding. So this could put their staffing in jeopardy. We have a number of homes in the metro area, including some in our own county, that are working with MDH crisis staffing managers. But some of them are occupied as high as 80%, what I would call pool or agency staffing, so they're not the normal employees. And at some point, and we've seen this last year, early in the pandemic, there's going to be a point in time that they're going to have no staff that comes in, and now you have a number of residents that are in jeopardy, perhaps. And what do you do? So it's different if you're an independent or part of a big group. And so they might call 911. So I've been working with a number of agencies that are in our area, and I'm also on the Healthcare Coalition work group on this. But it is at the governor's level. The National Guard is an option, but really they're a 36 to 72 hour option. The short term at 11 o'clock at night on Sunday when only the housekeeper shows up and there's no nurses, no facility staff, no housekeepers at one of our facilities could be something that we could be looking at. The probability is really low, but it's still there. So I just want to make sure people knew that one, there's planning that's being worked on at kind of a regional level and the state level, but locally between Janelle Hubbard, local public health director, and myself, working with Cindy Caesar and Human Services and others. If we got that call and it was your police department or fire department that had to respond or a deputy, what would we be doing? We'd be working together, kind of figure out a short-term solution. You may hear evacuate the place, get them to other locations. That's really unrealistic. My wife works in long-term care, and a couple of weeks ago, she had 84 phone calls for one bed at her facility. So it's better to keep these people in place for short term and start connecting the dots at MDH, Department of Human Services at the state and other, because there are some licensure and requirements for care and so forth. It gets really complex. But it's that basic, hey, what are we doing at 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday? We're working on a short-term plan, but it's no different than an apartment fire. We're going to have to do something with those residents. In this case, instead of evacuating them, we may keep them there and just do those basic needs with firefighters and or nurses that we have available. That's the biggest pieces, which are two big things, but I just want to make sure that people had an awareness, and I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Terry Stoltzman, Emergency Manager? All right, thank you, Terry. Move to item 9E, which is the Auto Theft Task Force. Chief?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Our embedded auto theft investigator that oversees auto thefts for Fridley, Spring Lake Park, and Columbia Heights. We're keeping them busy these days. We're working with PSDS to come up with an auto theft daily report that we can get out a hot sheet for all of our partners in Anoka County where the thefts are occurring. We are getting the final numbers for 2021 gathered, and I'll be able to share that hopefully at our next meeting for everybody to see where we're at with numbers and auto thefts and recoveries for 2021. We're finalizing our license plate reader policy. That can be, that can be a lot of controversy with that goes. So we have to have a good, solid policy. We've been encouraging everyone to get that as we're waiting for new license plate readers to come in and start using them throughout the county who's interested. I did see St. Paul. It looked like they enacted an ordinance that says if you possess a catalytic converter without a receipt or proof of purchase, that you can be charged with a misdemeanor. I just read that, I think, the other day in the paper, so I'm going to call Chief Axtell and see how we got that to go through and see if we can start maybe looking at doing something here in Fridley and maybe other places. But because we're all having problems with obviously catalytic converters, so I think it's an interesting ordinance to look at. And I'll tell you from reading police reports, the best advice I can give everyone and the crime prevention tip is don't start your car and leave it warm up in the morning with your keys in it. I think all law enforcement will tell you it's incredible how many cars are taken when people are just taking a shower, letting their cars run, and they're gone. And it's really unbelievable. So, but that's it, Mr. Chair.
Right. Thank you, Chief. I saw some stats. I think we had 14 carjackings last year, 7 by adults and 7 by juveniles.
In the county?
In the county.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Something like that.
Mr. Chair, just to compare that second precinct, I had that in a week.
Yeah.
Just within the last, yeah. So just to put it in perspective.
Well, Anoka County's a good place to work.
Right? Chair. We keep dropping them off with Crystal.
My favorite story comes out of Coon Rapids, where someone left their car running and eventually she called it in and Coon Rapids stopped him. And he said, "You mean if it's running and the keys aren't in it, it's a felony?" I don't know if it was in your city, Chief, but it was somewhere around your city, the resident. So that's kind of what we're dealing with.
Has there been any consideration to potentially go with a legislative bill or something in regards to the catalytic converters?
Yes, ma'am. I'm working with the state chiefs of police, and we've talked a lot about that, is to get some legislation, especially on the places that are buying these materials. And if they're buying, I mean, why does somebody come in with 8 of them? It's just
that are cut off.
That are cut off. Yeah, but the problem is too, they're going inside of them and getting the materials and just bringing the materials in too. So it's tough to manage. It seems to be going down a little bit in our city recently, but it does go up and down. And
Mr. Chair, the other issue is there are true legitimate scrappers out there. One who works for me, who buys junk cars, cuts the converters off, collects them, and brings them in. So there is some legitimacy to some of it. And I don't know how, I mean, he obviously can't get a title for every catalytic converter he scraps because half these vehicles won't have titles. However,
Let's talk about that.
well, there's something needs to be done. There's no question. I'm getting way too many jobs putting catalytic converters. With frustrated customers is never good. But, I mean, it's kind of like me arguing for potholes because it helps my suspension business. For productive and good social fabric.
Yeah, and we've been holding some places where we have one garage that's letting people bring it in, and we're marking catalytic converters on Priuses and CRVs, and the ones that are most popular and the most expensive to replace, or that they're worth the most too. So that's helped, I think, maybe a little bit by doing some of the markings, but it's a tough one to get our hands around. It really is.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief? Thank you, Chief. All right, let's move on to item number 10, which is elected officials input. We'll go down the list again. Pat Antonin, are you still on the line or not?
I'm here. I have nothing to report.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Brasted.
Commissioner Breasted expressed her regret she had to leave the call.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Buchla.
I just have a question, and maybe putting an item on a future agenda, on it with the mental health calls and such. And I'm wondering how we're doing as far as the jail and alternatives to jail for low-level offenders, whether it's mental health or chemical, or, you know, are we putting them in jail on trespass charges because we have nothing else in the community to do with them? Or, you know, maybe just give us, as elected officials, kind of a scenario of what resources are not available. Maybe it's something you've covered in the past, but me being new to jailing, I don't want to open that door.
Since we're talking jail, Sheriff, do you have thoughts on this?
Sure, Mr. Chair, the short version is the jail will book the people that are brought to the jail. And so, but I think law enforcement as a whole has kind of looked at things a little bit differently, and we've identified if somebody needs mental health services, we try to get them those services. Within the jail, we've also expanded our mental health treatment so that even if they are booked in for whatever charges, they have the opportunity to begin laying that foundation for getting them some help, as well as the MAT, the medical assisted treatment for addictions, which oftentimes closely correlate with some of those mental health challenges. And so we've rolled out quite a few programs to try and help people get back on their feet, to hopefully become the people that they're created to be, stop the revolving door, et cetera. But of course, it's never a perfect system, and we can always use more psych help and more programs. And you know, it's not intentionally kicking the can down the road, but when that new jail facility is up and running, we are going to be much more aggressive in the design and development of those mental health programs.
Mayor, that addresses your question. It is a very valid question for law enforcement, and where we go from here, I'm not sure, but.
I think more for me, I don't have a police chief per se. I have Commander Lensmeyer that comes in with the city, but as far as an overview for us as elected officials, as far as what services out there or what things available, because I do have community members that have certain scenarios and, you know, are asking questions, but it's, you know, it's cold outside, you've got homelessness, vagrancy, and calls for restrained people. Are you booking them to the jail? Or are you sending them to places where there's a 24-hour intake, or, you know, what's available here that you could share that information with?
County also has on-call groups for mental health response element. They also have emergency services available for the homeless people. If those fall through, we tend to get them a cab to Crystal. Kidding.
Commissioner Schulte, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mayor Buchla, the new jail, we are applying or working with the legislature to try and secure $11 million to add mental health services to the new jail. Specific programming, specific space for mental health services. So it's being taken seriously by public safety in Anoka County. Julie Breasted, the public safety chair, has made this a priority, and she'll be lobbying in the legislature for that $11 million to make sure our jail has those services available. Again, that's not an immediate effect for today. The sheriff touched on so many services that are available through Anoka County Human Services. I think they just have a one number contact. You just call that number and they'll deviate you to homeless care, mental health care, whatever it is. So there is quite a bit that's happening. It all happens behind the scenes. Very few people really know what's happening. But we do know there's a mental health issue in jails. And we're addressing it head on with the construction of our new jail.
Thank you. Chief Wise.
And Mr. Chair, actually to the mayor's point is that a lot of cities are doing different things that we don't talk about in this group, and maybe we should start doing that. Because Blaine and Coon Rapids are splitting an embedded social worker. Right. Other county jurisdictions are, has a crisis response team. So it's all just a little bit different. Same thing. All next to jail. So if there's an interest in elected, I should just talk about it.
That's a good point.
And where we're at in the winter, it's kind of that whole cabin fever mode, and the more we can do, whether it's, you know, if things out there, we're like, so whether it's using government resources or individuals and families taking care of their own and seeing opportunities. I can't help people with what I don't.
I think you raised a point, maybe at the next meeting is an agenda item. I certainly will ask each of the chiefs to see what's doing in their cities. Fair enough? Okay, thank you. Let's keep moving down. Let's see what else do I have. Mayor Feldman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to wish everybody a healthy and safe new year and thank everyone for your service in the past, present, and the future to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilman Johnson.
Thank you. Very brief. We're in the middle of Snowflake Days, so if you want to come to Coon Rapids and participate in that, that's great. If I'm not here at a future meeting, Pat Carlson is my alternate. Many of you know Pat, so he may be here in my place if I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on down. Mayor Marquez Simila.
I just want to say great work that we're doing here, and just thanks to everybody for looking out for our communities as we do.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Nelson.
Well, thanks for all the good input today. Thanks for all the hard work. I picked up a couple of things. Made up my mind we'll have a workshop really soon on the fencing so we can stay ahead of the curve. To come up there on board. I think that's very important so we ain't dragging our feet. It made 100% sense. So I'll be doing that. This guy's input about the catalytic converters and that ordinance is saying all in. We will be working on that and looking into it because I think that's great. And we can get that accomplished. It will be passed really soon. It would stand. So, and again, thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just one quick note on the positive side of it. Director Work has done a good job. We're almost at 100% staff on our police force. We're only down one person right now, so they've done a really good job of recruitment and planning. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. And I don't think Mayor Sanders joined us, right? And Councilman West, he must have.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Anoka. Thanks for your participation. Really, Anoka's PD is looking at staffing up based on retirements that we had. And then lastly, the city is looking forward to working with the county in their expansion of the jail in Crystal. Thanks, bye.
Being drafted. All right, thank you. Anybody have any old business they want to bring up? 11.
Yeah.
Anybody? All right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Does the elected official to say anything?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I only have one thing. It's 2022. It's an election year. Is it too early to have a skunk speech?
Yeah.
Okay, it probably is. I have nothing.
At another meeting, of course. I'm sorry, Commissioner. Get right over you. All right. Did I miss any other elected officials here? As long as I'm trying to cover my tracks. All right, very good. Old business. New business, the only thing I can say is we did get a dividend. Positive, we got over $1,000 back from League of Minnesota Cities for our insurance premium. So it went right back into the funds. Okay. Next item is the next meeting. The next meeting generally is, I think our bylaws say the last Wednesday in April. I will not be here. We traditionally have had it either the first or second week in May. Now, there's usually a Chiefs conference, isn't there? Is that going to happen again? Does anybody know on that?
That's in mid-April.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, like 14th or something. 4th through the 8th April.
April 4th through 8th. It's a little earlier than
Yep.
they've had it. Okay, good. Does anybody have any objection if we set this, say, for May 10th? Isn't that the, okay? May 11th? Is that going to conflict with the Law Enforcement Day, Sheriff?
That's what I was just trying to think. We had some discussion, Mr. Chair. I believe we're going to go the video route again for this year's memorial, so it should not be in conflict.
Okay. We could do it on May 4th. Is there a preference of the body? May 11th or May 4th? Makes some difference. All right, if you don't mind, let's do it May 11th. How's that? That would be a Wednesday. Send notice. And it'll be, I believe, at Columbia Heights Police Department. I think is where we've scattered it. Okay, anything else for the good of the body? Anything else? Hearing none. If nothing further, I'll declare us adjourned. Thank you for coming, everyone.